Hey there, long time no see. Just a disclaimer before we get started, my content is going to be switching up just a tiny bit. Don't worry for all you 67 diehard cryptid code fans, nothing drastic. I'll still be covering horror and cryptids from all over the world and internet, from movies, games, and real life as well. But I'd like my content to take a shift towards the more philosophical, sociological, and of course, conceptual, as I explore the depth that the art of horror has to offer. Now what does that mean for y'all? Well, cons are more random upload times, but pros, better, more unique, and in-depth passionate projects to enjoy. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope you like what I have coming as we delve into yet another movie monster, the Death Angels from A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place has taken the world by storm from the moment the franchise started in 2018. Most notably for its terrifying concept that puts the survivors of an alien apocalypse in a world where the slightest sound can get you killed. However, despite this absolutely horrifying idea, putting the very nature of us social animals at odds with our primary need and desire to communicate, A Quiet Place is not a horror franchise. Now yes, it's definitely thrilling, and the films will be sure to put you on the edge of your seat as your paranoia rises with each footstep and door creak. But A Quiet Place is truly about the individuals, and more accurately, the personal trials people endure as they try to accomplish goals that seem doomed from the very start. From loss to parenthood to mending bonds and finding a reason to live in a world that's already dead, The Quiet Place is a place of sanctuary that tests the human spirit. So join me as we look through all three films and explore the movie monster's secrets as they are revealed in the stories, and its greater roles in the narrative, as an angel that enforces these trials. The first A Quiet Place film follows the Abbott family as they try to recover from the traumatizing loss of their youngest family member, Beau Abbott, a death caused by one simple mistake, one caused by an attempt at kindness. The death leaves the family at odds with one another. However, the broken bonds between them is purely due to their own unwillingness to communicate, as none of them truly hold resentment towards one another, but instead feel as though it's their own fault for things being the way they are. But enough of that for now, because A Quiet Place holds nothing back when it comes to showing the movie monster. There are many times in this film where we get to see the Death Angels in action, which is not typical in many films of the same genre. The reason is that the Death Angels are more of an allegory for consequence, a narrative device used to punish a character from wavering from their own personal journey. But we'll get into that later. Let's first look at what these creatures actually are. The creatures, though never explicitly referred to as Death Angels, coined the name after being referred to as angels in a newspaper clipping. Standing at around 2 meters tall, with heavy plates of armor covering all but their joints, the Death Angels supposedly overwhelmed the military and began to spread across all of America. We learn that they are a blind alien species with impenetrable skin and unprecedented strength, with a hypersensitivity to even the slightest sound. There are 3 apparently patrolling the area, but possibly as many as 5, and that, despite killing anything that makes a sound, the angels do not consume their prey. They are bent on destruction of anything that makes a sound, and do such for seemingly no purpose. Angels of death, true in form. We flash forward nearly a year, where we learn that the Abbotts are now preparing to have another child. This is, for lack of another word, incredibly stupid, but that's not the point that's trying to be conveyed in the narrative. As we see that all the characters are trying to cope with the reality of their own mortality, and their own roles in the death of Beau, and having another kid in the eyes of the parents, Lee and Evelyn, is a way to prove themselves that they are capable of taking care of their family, to help them survive. Interestingly enough, the goal of having this baby without putting anybody in jeopardy is motive enough to bring the family together, albeit with some tension. We get to see all their various ways to counter the creature's high sensitivity to sound, from laying down sand paths, marking boards that don't creak, to removing doors and changing Monopoly pieces with yarn figures. But more importantly, we get to see the parents in full force as the protectors of the family. Even past being the people who make up for the mistakes of the children, they have gone above and beyond studying the creatures, is here where we learn most of the information about the monsters, including getting some insight into their appearance and look into the Lee's research, with security cameras and a radio, as well as a hearing aid he is trying to make for his deaf daughter. In a way, the trial that the parents are attempting to go through is to prove themselves as the ideal parents, and though they prove time and time again to be valiant protectors, they lack in their ability to communicate, somewhat due to setting, but primarily disposition. This is most present in the relationship between Lee and the daughter, Reagan, who are shown to have the most tension between them, as Reagan feels as though Bu's death was her fault and Lee is struggling to find a way to communicate that she isn't blamed. Now, the next time we see a notable moment, both narratively and in regards to the Death Angels, is when Lee takes the cowardly son, Marcus, to learn how to fish by the river. This is where we learn that the creatures don't attack sounds such as white noise, and that so long as that sound is louder, the creatures will not attack them. Now, notably, it's here a moment is shared between Lee and Marcus in words, in which Marcus acts as a voice for Reagan and Lee explains that he doesn't blame her for the death of Bu, but we'll get back to this. As once Evelyn goes into labor, things turn drastically for the worse, as the family must split up and find a way to deal with the three monsters hunting them at night. This results in characters having to overcome their personal flaws and confront the reality of themselves to protect one another. Two notable moments are when the creature hears Reagan's broken high-pitched hearing aid and it scares one of the creatures off, and when we see the same thing happen and the creature manages to rip through a grain silo, demonstrating its unstoppable strength. The film ends with the father sacrificing himself, but not before confessing to his daughter that he had always loved her, and finally, the family learning of the high-pitched weakness of the angels and with a fighting chance against the remaining creatures. A moving story, with cool monsters and much emotional weight behind every moment, but I want to take a moment to look at the burdens this family bears, and what their relationship to the Death Angels and more importantly sound is. We learn that when the Death Angels first arrived, society collapsed because they were an unstoppable force. Their armor was too thick to be penetrated by military-grade weapons, and their strength meant hiding wasn't an option. Yet somehow, this family managed to survive, largely because of their daughter's disability, which made them learn how to communicate without making a sound. In that way, sound was never really a necessity for them in the first place, but it had always been a privilege. When the aliens came, that privilege was snuffed out and sound became a burden, and in an ironic twist, became sacred. You see, every time a character makes a sound with their voice, it's representative of a release for that character. Almost as though they are letting go of a burden, taking a step away from the trials and tribulations that now dominate their life. It was, in a sense, foreshadowed it would be this way in the beginning of the film, when Bu tells Reagan that they'll escape the horrors of the world on a rocket ship and fly away. And he later dies with that rocket ship in hand. He doesn't have to live in fear, and yet he doesn't get to live any longer. He made a sound, a step back, and it had consequences. From that point, whenever a character makes a vocal sound, it operates as an escape, be it of physical or emotional pain, or to connect on a level that can't always be achieved through the movement of their hands. But this still leaves Reagan out. She can speak, but there's a level of disconnect as she cannot hear. However, the sound that she does make comes from the gift from her father, and it is that sound that offers the family a chance to escape the trial from the angels, and, in turn, help the world escape from that trial. The second film is, in my opinion, the weakest of the three in terms of narrative and development. However, it does go a ways to communicate the journey the family is on, as well as the state of the world. In the film, we get to see the family the day the apocalypse happens, typically referred to by the characters as just that day. Not much is important to us, except we get to see the creatures arrive on a meteor, and that they can survive orbital entry. In a sense, they fell from the heavens, which makes the name Death Angels very fitting. I should mention, we also get to see the Death Angels react to a shotgun shell, in which it manages to tuck into an oval-like shape instantly before attacking again, implying an insane reaction speed to sound as well. The story picks up right after the ending of the first film, where the characters, now with the hearing aid as a weapon, must abandon their home as they try to figuratively and literally move forward. In their journey, they meet Emmett, a family friend who was presumed dead. Emmett is stagnant in his journey in that he feels he could not do enough for his family, and that's why they had died. That, paired with the reality that the world has become an apocalypse of nothing worth saving, prevents him from wanting to move forward. However, this changes when Reagan learns that a song on the radio might be a broadcast from survivors, and, despite protest from her family, goes to share the hearing aid on the broadcast to help people fight back against the angels. Arcs are similar, with Marcus still overcoming cowardice and Evelyn trying to be a good parent. But Emmett and Reagan are on a new journey that deals with what is worth saving. With Reagan trying to convince her family, and more importantly Emmett, that pushing forward and giving people a chance to fight is not only what Lee would have wanted, but that it's the right thing to do. In terms of the Death Angels, we get to see a lot about how they have impacted the world, and also how they went about destroying society. We get to see them perform acts of athleticism, which proves that hiding up, high, or down low isn't a solid solution. And, as Reagan and Emmett attempt to find the survivors, we get to see evidence that these creatures do hold some level of social intelligence, but also hold a greater level of ignorance. It's around the latter half of the film where they stumble across Raider equivalents, implying that these were the people that Emmett believed were not worth saving. Although in nearly every apocalypse situation you would expect to see bad people, it's particularly strange that people have come together to harm others in a world where solitude is so beneficial. Regardless, it's interesting as we get to see them use sound traps and later get to see the creatures are too heavy to stay afloat, jumping into the water with no hesitation and sinking to the bottom, which would imply they don't really know what water is. Eventually, Emmett and Reagan find the survivors who are living their relatively best lives without the fear of the creatures on a secluded island. It's here where we learn that the day the creatures appeared, boats were lined up to evacuate people, and despite people pushing forward when the screaming started, only 2 boats would get off the docks. Upon the leader asking if Emmett came here out of necessity to find help, he responds that it was necessity to give it, and he tells him about the hearing aid. Emmett is given time to reflect about his family, with the idea that in doing this, maybe he has finally done enough. If not for them, then maybe others. But in that calm moment, it's revealed an angel had snuck onto the boat, leading to one final confrontation that results in Reagan finally spreading the hearing aid to the world. Again, there isn't too much in this film to ponder, but it is still a good watch with a hopeful ending that, though not as moving as the last, earns itself a teardrop. The Death Angels serve exclusively as an obstacle and an animal, and aren't really symbolic of anything, and they are notably less imposing than in the first film. Though sound is not nearly as symbolically used, it is still present as a release of pain that puts people in jeopardy all the same. However, the music and soundtrack does wonders in communicating the themes of reflection and peace that come with letting go and moving forward. This film is my personal favorite out of the 3, and is somewhat ironically the least horror of the 3 as well. More importantly, it takes the themes of the first film and expands on them, all while showing us more of the Death Angels than ever before. In complete honesty, I could have made this entire video based on just this story, but it felt like a disservice not to mention them all. A Quiet Place Day 1 follows Sam, a terminally ill cancer patient whom has admittedly soured towards most people and towards living, believing she is already dead. As chance would have it, she finds herself in Manhattan, New York, watching a puppet performance with her day home the day the Death Angels arrive, where she is stranded in the midst of the apocalypse. Sam, now with her cat Frodo, has one simple goal: get to Harlem and get pizza. We get some insight into what happened that day and what it meant for the city, such as the evacuations, military operations, and bombing of Manhattan's bridges in an attempt to isolate the Angels. But, more notably, we see that the creatures came to Earth in numbers likely exceeding the hundreds, considering the state of the world a year later, and again, this is just what we see in Manhattan. Now, most of this film treats the creatures the same as the last two, with bat-like clicking noises and an insatiable urge to kill anything that makes a sound. But, unlike the first two films, there seems to be near no lenience with what causes a creature to be alerted, likely because the sheer number in the city means that one is around nearly every corner. We see quite a few key developments with the Death Angels. Firstly, we see that when there's enough of them, they attack in packs as opposed to just one investigator, like normal. Second, we actually see one drowning in the sewer, proving that they can't hold their breath for very long, and that they can drown despite knowing that they don't need oxygen. Third, we see a massive Death Angel, notably larger than the others, that appears almost aged with its gray armor. Whether this is an alpha, queen, or just a big one, no one knows. But what we do know is that this one finds egg-like plants, full of a silk-like, milk-like substance of which it can seemingly smell and consume. And we also see it call the others, proving of a social system, but not necessarily a social hierarchy. We get to see a lot of Sam's reaction to the environment, as well as the leader of the island from the second film viewing it all, and the moment where we get to see how sacred sound became, with a man being killed for attempting to say a sentence, albeit one with malicious cause. Although it appears that everyone understands sound alerts the creatures, it also appears that many just assume it's because they can hear and not because it's their apparent only sense. When Sam sets out on her journey, we get a decent amount of characterization. We get to see that she's brave and willing to put others before herself, even with no real gain, which contrasts her demeanor in a showing of her true character. After a bit, we see the event that the leader of the island talked about in the second film, in which hundreds of people push forwards to get to the boats, and it results in death and screaming. But before that, we get a contrasting shot that shows Sam entering deeper into the city against the crowd, accepting her trial amongst Death Angels and proving to be unique in her goals and stance. This all accumulates with the introduction of Eric, and from this point on, the thematic ideas are truly exemplified. Eric and Sam have one of the most unique relationships I have ever seen in fiction, in that it's not necessarily friendly or romantic, and it would be a push to call them acquaintances either. They are two people who view each other in an unconventional and estranged personal way that leads to a heartfelt connection full of selflessness. When Eric first arrives, following a lost Frodo back to Sam, he is quick to follow her in an almost golden retriever-esque way. Sam, annoyed by his unreasonable following of her, turns around and asks him to stop. Eric heeds everything she has to say about the boats and the direction and her goal, but he doesn't respond, simply saying that he was only in America for law school and that it was the one thing he was supposed to do, and that he doesn't want to die here. Sam agrees to let him tag along to her apartment with the implication that after the storm settles, Eric should leave to the boats. After successfully breaking into the apartment by timing their actions with the thunder strikes, Sam and Eric share an interesting moment in which Eric in a way annoys Sam by trying to get to know her, and Sam eventually requests that Eric reads her some poetry, and, in a moment that is reminiscent of Lee and Marcus at the waterfall, yell as the noise outside blocks them out. In a sense, in this world, the chance to make a sound alone or with someone is the chance to bond without chains. It's a step away from the trial that keeps pressuring them to move forward. It's a moment to rest, but something more entirely. The day after, Sam continues her journey to go get pizza, with Eric not so secretly following behind. And it's a good thing too. Despite Eric being portrayed as cowardly in nearly every moment, it is him alone that is keeping Sam and Frodo alive. From pushing doors to making distractions to lighting the path and pulling them from the water, eventually going out of his way to go and get pain medications, and then even to what appears to be the Death Angel nest, just to save Frodo. Now, Eric does a lot for Sam in this film, but notably gives little reason as to why, and when he's asked about himself, he rarely gives complete answers, and doesn't try to open up. This trend continues into the latter portions of the film, when he learns of Sam's desire to relive the memories she had at her father's performances and the pizza they got afterwards. Unfortunately, the place she wanted to go, Patsy's, is completely destroyed. However, Eric, going above and beyond, finds a pizza from a neighboring branch and writes Patsy's on it to cheer her up, and even leading to Eric putting on a silent performance with her in the place her father used to perform. The film ends with Sam taking Eric to the boats and distracting the creatures long enough for Eric to escape with Frodo in a dramatic leap into the water, symbolizing the leap of courage and faith that he as a character confronted in his attempt to help Sam relive her childhood. In Sam's last message to Eric, written with her dad's sweater, she says thank you and that the city sings when it's quiet, as she blasts music from a stereo as a last hurrah, accepting her fate to the angels with a content smile on her face. When you take a moment to look back on this film and really let it sink in that every moment these characters do or say anything, they are placing their lives on the line and facing the angels, yet still they constantly go out of their way to do more and more for one another, it's incredibly moving. And looking back at it, it's quite obvious why. Like I said, Eric and Sam view each other in different ways, whereas Eric, whom's had one thing he was supposed to do that is now an impossibility because the world is ending, finds Sam and by helping her, in a sense, is trying to do something right, but in his constant efforts to help this random cancer patient he found because of a cat, Sam is very much reminded of being with her father, was literally seen after the performance when she gives Eric her dad's sweater. It's only after all the effort Eric put in to help Sam be at peace with death that she takes him all the way back and across the city, and in turn leads the angels away. And when Eric and Frodo jump, he's truly escaping the trial as the angels reach out, unable to drag him back, finding safety and no longer being burdened with silence. It's Frodo, the cat, who symbolizes this safety. At every moment, Frodo brings Eric and Sam together, literally and figuratively. For Frodo, they go above and beyond, as he is symbolic of their need for each other to beat their trial, to find a reason to live, and to find peace in death. A Quiet Place is not a horror franchise, the same way that the Death Angels are not a messenger or a guardian of human spirit. No, A Quiet Place is where people go to prove their heart. Be it the fathers who sacrifice to protect their family, or the mothers who push past their pain to save their children. Be it the strangers who find a reason in the apocalypse, or the kids who fight for a better future. It's the silent voices and silent hearts that sing amongst their own trials. A Quiet Place is home. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing, or disliking, or commenting if you're cool like that. Honestly, it means the world that you watched this far at all, and I hope you'll stick around for the future videos as well. Sayonara.
Danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked